That's a very cool
Nice
tripod.
tripod.
Did you
Very
Google
much.
tripod?
Yes. Hopefully the lighting will be okay. It's a little dark, but it should be good.
Yeah.
Good morning, fellow Toastmasters, Madam President, Madam Toastmaster. It's very pertinent that discipline and commitment are going to fit right into what I have to say today. Many years ago, in the 70s, when I was years old, I was working for a company, psychological testing company, called Behaviordyne in Palo Alto. And their clients were troubled children mostly, but other people that had emotional issues. And even Dr. Joyce Brothers used to use our service. So this was back in the day when I had to do IBM punch cards and take boxes of them to a computer center in Sunnyvale and run them through and get the processing. You only drop the box once. And then you learn from that you never drop them, or at least you number them before you work with them. But that's kind of a tedious role to do when you're working in that industry. I'm starting with that because in order for me to apply for this job, I had to take the same test. And a few months after I started, they said, well, do you want a free analysis of your test? I said, certainly, because in those days it cost $50 to get the analysis. So I went ahead and sat down, and boy, was I bowled over, because they said at the time I was single that I was a flirt, that I was good with people, working with people or working alone, which was okay. I understood that. And it had a lot of little different characteristics about myself. And the gentleman that was doing the analysis, excuse me, said, you're really surprised because how accurate these reports are on you. And I said, yes, I am really overwhelmed. The one thing that grabbed me, though, it said I was disorganized. Boy, was I in a huff over that. So I thought, okay, I'll show the world. And I thought, well, this is good, because if the test can see that I'm disorganized, I must be, and I really was. So I promptly went out and bought an organization book and started to read a couple of pages, put it down, lost it for a year. And I was completely disorganized. Found the book, grabbed it, started reading a couple of chapters, and it said start small. So I started small with safety pins and bobby pins and paper clips, and to this day, 30 some odd years later, I can tell you where every single one of those are in my house at all times, because I started with that. Then I lost the book again, and we went through that routine, which really kind of drove home that I had no discipline, no self-discipline, and I didn't have a commitment really to do this. Eventually I did, read the book, and put a lot of things into place. One being putting all your papers in one room. I had them scattered in different rooms. If you're going to work on a table and make a mess, sometimes we would and wouldn't even see the dining room table. My goal now is, even if it's still unfinished, I pick up the papers and move it to the office where that's where all the papers reside. So if there is a paper missing, I know it has to be in only one room. And it narrows things down. And I even hired an organizer to help me, and she walked in and she looked around, and I had the kitchen organized and this organized, and she said, well, okay, where is it that you need help? I said, this room. And she couldn't even walk in, because there were piles of paper on boxes, and you had to crawl over things to get to, and it was embarrassing, but I needed her help. And I said, where do we start? And she grabbed the nearest, tallest pile. She grabbed the top little receipt. She says, we start here. What do we do? Because one of the problems that I found in researching and trying to find out about myself is that I'm a perfectionist. And perfectionists tend to put off decisions because they have not been able to allot enough time to deal with it perfectly. So if you can't deal with it perfectly and you don't have that block of time, then you just say, okay, forget it. And it just sits there. And then another pile comes in. Oh, I'll deal with it later because I don't have my 4-hour block of time that I need to work on this one little thing. And before you know it, it snowballs into something huge. So it's very interesting about learning organization and learning about yourself. And I found out that organizers hire other organizers because they bring insight in. I have had organizers come to my home, maybe 6 over the years, and they'll see something that I do and they'll say, do you mind if I borrow that idea and use it in something else? Because they have not maybe come across the kind of problems I have. For example, I live in an apartment and I have shelves that are wire. Well, I want to put things on the wire shelves that don't fall through. So what I've done is recycle and recycle. I recycle the lids of large Tupperware or any kind of plastic containers. And if the containers have cracked or I've misplaced them or they're being used as an open container, I use that shelf, the top, as an extended shelf underneath my towels. Nobody sees it, but my towels, then I can make use of maximizing that wasted space between the shelf and the door closure. And another thing that I learned, which was very interesting, is back in the day when I lived in Redwood City, I spoke with the owner of the apartment building in which I lived. And I asked him, I said, aren't you curious or concerned when people might be messing up the inside of your apartments? And he said, do you know something, that I never have to worry about that? And I have a trick. And I said, what's that trick? He says, I look inside their car. And the state of their car tells me the state of their living arrangement. So I have found over the years, this is so true. When my apartment is a mess, so is my car. It transfers. And so when I start to clean out my car, I automatically start to put things away in my home. So I am respectfully concluded on my speech. And you may notice that I might slip away for a little bit because I'm going to go look inside some windows of some cars parked outside. Thank you, Lady Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, Madam President.
Thank you so much. That was so good. I just did that last weekend. I completely organized my garage and my